When we relate that to gambling, a lot of the time, if someone's had a lapse, for example, people will report this experience of I was fine 1 minute and then next minute I was sitting in front of a poker machine. It's a very or it feels like a very quick automatic process for people. The practice of mindfulness slows that down and breaks that down and helps people notice, hang on, my mind's drifted, I'm thinking about gambling, I'm having the urge in my body to want to gamble, and intervene in some way earlier rather than it getting to that point.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Nick.
I'm Anastasia, and we are the hosts of the Let's Talk Gambling podcast.
And today we're going to talk about mindfulness and embracing mindfulness. Big topic, something I feel like we could both talk about quite a lot. Yeah. Let's just start at the start. What is mindfulness? How can we define it? And then what are some of the ways we can put it into practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Mindfulness is it's great that it's really made it into the mainstream. A lot of people have heard about mindfulness. They have an idea as to what it might be, or at least have heard the word before. But I like to describe mindfulness as the opposite to being on autopilot. So mindfulness is really a way of being in the world that enables us to be present. We're aware of our surroundings, of what's going on internally for us. We're just really in the moment and not sort of lost and stuck in our thoughts. But we're able to do so in a way that's really non-judgmental and just in a state of being able to observe and notice where we are, what's going on, and how we're going.
Cool. So non-judgment. So not attaching a label to how we're feeling, just noticing how we're feeling, observing how we're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've ever had the experience of noticing a particular feeling, sometimes just saying hey, you know what? Actually, I feel really anxious right now. There's something in that takes the power out of the anxiety rather than fuels it more.
Yeah, I get you. Maybe not identifying with it as well. Instead of saying I'm anxious, being I feel anxious.
Yes.
Even just saying that, I'm cool, feel a little bit less anxious.
Yeah, it takes some of the power out of it by just being able to notice. And that's our mindfulness skills, just being able to observe, notice, and be present in the moment.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing as well is just the ability to just be in the moment right now, controlling what we can control. Because we can't control what's happened in the past that we can project backwards. And we can't control what's going to happen in the future. We can't project or predict what's going to happen, no matter how good our intentions are. So it's just coming back to this moment right here, right now.
Yeah. And we know that if people spend a lot of time thinking about the past, that can lead to a lot of feelings of sadness and depression if we get stuck in that rumination. And on the flip side, if people spend a lot of time thinking about the future to the point where it becomes excessive worry, this can lead people to feel quite anxious. But being in the moment and just focusing, as you said, on what we can control in the here and now is ideal.
Cool. So curious, if we speak about gambling and there's someone who's experiencing gambling harm, or maybe they identify as a gambling addict, or they've been diagnosed in some way, what can mindfulness do for a person? How can they use that tool or technique to, better promote some healthy behaviors or healthy habits?
Yeah, lots of ways. So at all points of the trajectory, I think mindfulness can be really useful when it comes to gambling. So first of all, that present awareness can really help someone notice if they're feeling, I'd describe it as if someone's feeling a little bit wobbly. They're not necessarily feeling as solid, stable, secure in their recovery, or if they've changed their relationship with gambling, they're not feeling as solid in that. Maybe they're having some urges to gamble. Maybe they're having some emotional things going on in their life, whatever it may be. There's just this wobbliness. And we can get stuck in day-to-day life, the busyness of life, and just push on and push those feelings aside. But as a strategy, that doesn't really work that effectively or in the long run. So mindfulness can help me notice, hey, I don't feel 100% what's going on. And it allows for that self-reflection piece. Mindfulness can then help us ride the wave of that urge if we are wanting to gamble, in the sense that I can use mindfulness as a grounding strategy to just help anchor me in the here and now, be present with what's going on or with something else that I might be doing in that moment, and reorient my focus away from gambling.
Right. So instead of avoiding the issue or avoiding the feeling that's a bit uncomfortable, this gives us an opportunity to just face it in a really safe and supportive way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I kind of use the phrase like sit with it, like sit with the urge or sit with the feeling or sit with the impulse to want to gamble, notice it for what it is, but we don't need to act from that place.
Yeah, and like also a recognition, like at least for me, I'm not sure about you, but like mindfulness, like it can mean a lot of things. And a lot of people would go straight to like meditation. I'm sitting there with my eyes shut singing Kumbaya. And like that is one form of meditation, which is a form of mindfulness.
Yeah.
What are some of the different ways that people could practice it or embody it or just have a crack at like trying a mindfulness activity?
Yes. So I kind of think about there being an anchor point for mindfulness, and that can either be something outside of us in our environment or it can be something internal. So when we think about internal anchors, often it's like mindfulness of breath. Let me focus on my breathing. For some people who've never done mindfulness before, just focusing on breathing for a period of 2, 5, 20 minutes can be really challenging and sometimes uncomfortable. So I often say a great starting point is use what's in your environment, external to you, as the anchor. So if we think about the 5 senses and I do mindfulness right now, that would be me saying, I'm sitting in this room, I'm speaking with you, I can see your jacket that you've got on, I can hear my voice as I speak, I can feel my hair against my neck, my feet on the ground. You know, this is me engaging the senses to just notice and observe what's going on for me right now and be immersed in that experience rather than lost in thoughts about something else.
Cool. Yeah. I've actually had that technique that I've practiced with someone where they're like, cool, what are 5 things you can see? What are 4 things that you can feel? What are 3 things that you can smell? 2 things you can taste, 1 thing you can touch. So yeah, and that really helped to, as you said, really helped to ground me in that moment. I'm thinking as well, like, you know, I know my partner and some people in my life, like meditation for them is like a real staple and they really love it. I also know some other people in my life, particularly 1 or 2 who experience ADHD or attention deficit disorder. For them, their worst nightmare is sitting still with their eyes shut for 5, 10 or 20 minutes every morning. Just wondering like what could a person do if just sitting still with meditation doesn't really appeal?
Yeah. When I think about mindfulness as kind of a way of being in the world, we can essentially attach that to anything we're doing. So we can do mindfulness of any activity. I could be washing the dishes in the morning or doing a very kind of routine thing, brushing my teeth. And I can be like, right, when I brush my teeth in the morning, that's my couple of minutes of mindfulness. What does the toothbrush feel against my gums or the sound of the water running? So I think for people who find it hard to sit, be still, carve out the time for mindfulness, attach it to an activity that you already do every day, and just go through that process of describing in a sensory way what's going on. Now, the part I guess we sort of haven't said is that if you're not able to kind of stick with that present moment and your thoughts do wander and you do end up thinking about gambling or what's coming up later in the day or what I did yesterday, like that's really normal and natural. Our mind moves around, it jumps around, that's what it does. So we're not failing at mindfulness or we're not doing it wrong or unable to do it if we can't just be present. What we're actually building is the capacity to notice my mind's gone somewhere else. I've noticed that. Let me gently bring it back to the present moment. And that's the skill that we're building.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point, that it's really normal and common and regular that if we're sitting there and we're trying to not think, naturally thoughts are going to come up. Or if we're sitting there and we're saying some mantra or we're counting our breaths, naturally something's going to break that at some point. And that's not us failing or not being mindful. That's the experience we're trying to work on, which is not we need to be perfect, but it's like, cool, here's an opportunity to come back to that present moment. Here's an opportunity for me to kind of just start afresh without that negative self-talk and saying I'm failing and I'm doing it wrong. But actually, that's the whole point of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when we relate that to gambling, a lot of the time, if someone's had a lapse, for example, people will report this experience of kind of, I was fine 1 minute and then next minute I was sitting in front of a poker machine. It's a very kind of, or it feels like a very quick automatic process for people. The practice of mindfulness slows that down and breaks that down and helps people notice, hang on, my mind's drifted. I'm thinking about gambling. I'm having the urge in my body to want to gamble. and intervene in some way earlier rather than it getting to that point. So mindfulness helps us just be really aware of ourselves, which then enables us to help ourselves better.
Cool. And obviously you have a background as in the clinical field as a psychologist. How do you, or do you, maybe I should ask, like integrate mindfulness techniques in your sessions with people who experience gambling harm? Like, is that something that you utilize? And if so, how do you do it?
Totally. I introduce it as being a really useful skill. Often I'll be like, hey, have you ever heard of mindfulness before? And people will say, yes, it works super well. Or sometimes people will say, actually, I tried that thing, it doesn't work for me. In which case I kind of want to unpack that, because often people think if they can't be present, it means it's not working. And that's just not the case.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about like really practical ways to practice mindfulness and use it as a skill, and to be able to use it to help me feel really sort of stable and regulated in my day-to-day life, but also how to use it as a skill for when I have escalated in some way. I'm feeling emotionally not great, or I'm having strong urges and impulses to gamble. So whether that's that kind of sensory 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 strategy, whether it's like listening to some audios and practicing mindfulness of breath, whether that's some sort of mindfulness doing a body scan, whether it's mindfulness of washing the dishes, like we'll kind of figure out what's the best way for this person to integrate it and practice it as a skill in their life.
And yeah, maybe effectively it could be like a moving meditation, like someone going surfing or going for a bushwalk, or, you know, I know for me, like there are times when I've just been sitting at my desk all day and I'm like, the last thing I want to do is sit still. I actually want to go play like a competitive team sport, and my single focus is to like kick that ball.
Yes.
So like, yeah,
Totally.
just what works for you.
And the idea of doing something like going bushwalking and being present, like, isn't that what the experience is all about, right? Like actually going for the walk and being aware of what's around you and how you feel in your surroundings, rather than lost in our thoughts. That's, you know, I'll give a personal example. Sometimes I'll sit down to eat a chocolate or an ice cream and be like, I'm so excited to eat this, but I'm sitting in front of the TV, I've eaten it, and then I haven't enjoyed it. So mindfulness helps us actually kind of enjoy the present moment more, rather than be lost in other things or distracted or on autopilot where we don't actually feel that fulfillment.
Tell you what, the food piece, like I definitely connected with that, because I'm the type who can just eat food and just smash it all down without thinking, or maybe use my phone or get lost in a conversation. Mindfulness technique I actually practiced through the Headspace app was mindful eating.
Yeah.
And what I did was I had to look at the food, had to hold the food, had to touch it, had to smell it, had to put it in my mouth, slowly chew on it, and then eat it. And so obviously pretty weird experience, and most people wouldn't be down for that. But for me, it's just an example that like there's no rules about what mindfulness has to look like, and it's worth just experimenting and just see what works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people are applying it to gambling sort of recovery or changing their relationship, it can be implemented at all stages, from noticing urges, thinking about if you are gambling, helping kind of stop the period of gambling earlier rather than getting lost in it, and just kind of a general strategy to regulate our emotions day to day.
Yeah, really useful life skill, and specifically for gambling as well. Awesome. Thank you.
So we have had a really interesting chat about what mindfulness is. Nick, can you give us a bit of a summary?
We could speak about it forever, but basically we spoke about what mindfulness is, all the different ways people can practice it, and then what's the relevance piece to gambling? How can this actually support a person who's experiencing gambling harm?
Yeah. And if you want to find out more about mindfulness or any other strategies, topics, ways that you can help yourself if you are gambling or want to help someone else as well, please head over to the Gamblers Help website. We've got lots of resources available there. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.